coronavirus pandemic. Our special report includes a look at vaccine ethics.
When you don't have any, 100% good option, then it becomes a real difficult choice.
How you can discern the right choice for you and your family. Struggling schools. Why Catholic educators worry about the pandemic's long-term effects. On the front lines. How Catholic priests serve those who are suffering. And story of hope. How one landlord says his faith inspired a generous act of kindness. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, December 28th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight we bring you a special report on the coronavirus pandemic. The virus not only creates challenges, but also opportunities to help each other. In the next half hour, we want to take a closer look at the debate over vaccines, the impact on Catholic churches and schools, and the ways Catholic priests are ministering to patients. But first, the numbers. Johns Hopkins University reports more than 75 million coronavirus cases across the world, including 17 million right here in the United States. And globally, over 1.6 million people have died, including more than 300,000 in the U.S. As the COVID fight continues, high-risk groups are now getting vaccines, and over time, more vaccine options will become available to a wider range of people. Tonight, we look at what guidance the church provides as Catholics consider getting vaccinated. Correspondent Mark Irons reports. Mark?
Tracy, people at home may be asking themselves if they should get a coronavirus vaccine. Their decision may depend on age, risk factors, or loved ones around them. But Catholics should also consider the ethics behind the vaccines.
A global fight to pierce the pandemic. Some companies receiving approval of their vaccine shots, with others close behind. It's a hopeful development, but also a challenge for Catholics when vaccines raise an ethical red flag.
When you don't have any, 100% good option, then it becomes a real difficult choice.
Some of the vaccines are made using fetal cell lines obtained decades ago through abortions. Dr. Joseph Meaney, the president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center, offers this.
It would be better to take a vaccine that has less to do with these abortion-derived cell lines than one that is completely immersed in them.
A 2005 document from the Pontifical Academy for Life notes Catholics have an obligation to use ethically sourced vaccines when available. According to the pro-life Charlotte Lozier Institute, the vaccines developed by Pfizer and Moderna were not made with tainted cell lines.
What's actually injected into your arm when you receive a Moderna or a Pfizer vaccine will not contain any cell parts from aborted fetal cell lines. That's huge, right? That's really good news.
However, after vaccine production, abortion-derived cell lines were used in final testing of these two vaccines. Providing further guidance, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops states, in view of the gravity of the current pandemic and the lack of availability of alternative vaccines, the reasons to accept the new COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna are sufficiently serious to justify their use, despite their remote connection to morally compromised cell lines. The statement, signed by Archbishop Joseph Naumann, the USCCB chairman of pro-life activities. He says safe vaccination should be considered an act of charity to others and part of our moral responsibility for the common good.
We really have to think about not only protecting our own health, but the health of others.
But Archbishop Joseph Naumann also says Catholics have an obligation to protest the companies using unethical means in vaccine production or testing.
I think it's a moment for us, again, to advocate for the sanctity of life of the human being and to never let abortion become acceptable.
The vaccine developed by AstraZeneca was produced using aborted fetal cell lines. U.S. bishops finding it more morally compromised, saying it should be avoided if there are alternatives available. Dr. Tim Millay with the Catholic Medical Association says use your voice to bring about change if you have to take a morally compromised vaccine.
Do it because it's the best thing to do for you and everybody around you. But going forward, we got to keep pushing. We've got to get away from the use of these cells.
Keep in mind, some common vaccines we already have in use rely on these compromised cell lines. For example, the rubella vaccine fights a virus which can be harmful to pregnant women and their developing babies. But currently, there's no approved ethical alternative to the rubella vaccine here in the U.S. It can be taken, but again, the church says we should always advocate for more ethical options. Tracy.
Okay, thank you so much for that report, Mark. Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. All right, now that you know the coronavirus vaccines have mixed moral reviews, it's important to discern what's right for you and your family. We asked Dr. Joseph Meaney from the National Catholic Bioethics Center to speak about that as well.
It's a tragic situation when there isn't a completely ethical vaccine available, which is our current situation, sad to say. And so that what that forces people then to do is to make a decision in conscience, to discern. And what does that involve? Well, there has to be a serious reason. Now, obviously, this is a very serious disease, so that serious reason exists. But then you have to have a personal serious reason. So what would that be? Well, a person may be especially susceptible to the disease. They have underlying conditions that make it very even a higher risk for them if they don't get vaccinated. Or they might be a frontline healthcare worker, or another frontline worker that is in contact with so many people, and they have a heightened responsibility to protect themselves and to protect others, the general public. But those they might also have a lot of people depending on them, or that they're very close to, that have underlying conditions. So, I mean, these things can vary very much, and they have to be kind of looked at particularly. Each person's situation will be different. But the church, gives us a lot of leeway in the sense of, we're not given all the, this is serious reason for you and not a serious reason for another. It requires a very well-formed conscience. And that is something that is repeated by the church so often in the catechism and elsewhere. But I don't think our modern society has really wrestled with that enough. It's not just a feeling. Conscience is all about, taking the objective facts and praying about it and discerning, trying to find God's will for oneself. And that can vary from individuals very legitimately. Now, some things are just objectively wrong, and you couldn't discern in conscience, gosh, I will do this. I feel good about it. But in this case, right, the connection with abortion is so remote, and the circumstances are so extreme that in a sense, we're in front of this dilemma. There's a very good thing to do about refusing a vaccine in terms of a pro-life witness, et cetera. But then there's also, saving other people's lives and being, obviously not everyone who catches it will die, but, there's a certain urgency there. And so I don't think we can minimize the personal responsibility that individuals have to really think through, should I, postpone, wait, or go for the vaccine? It's a very individualized decision that has to be made, I think, very, very carefully, and also trying to keep in mind, what the church thinks and believes about this. So there's a lot of freedom, but at the same time, a lot of responsibility.
Vatican City has decided to offer a coronavirus vaccine starting in January. The Pfizer vaccine will be made available to residents, employees, and family members over the age of 18. Since the coronavirus outbreak, there have been more than 25 COVID cases inside the Vatican City state. Pro-life senators are outraged that the nation's largest abortion provider, Planned Parenthood, received millions of dollars from the Paycheck Protection Program. The money was designed to help small businesses survive the pandemic. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales earlier filed this report.
Congresswoman Debbie Lesko wants to know, how did Planned Parenthood of Arizona receive over $1 million? Arizona is one of 24 Planned Parenthood locations nationwide that receive Paycheck Protection Program loans.
We really want to get to the bottom of why an abortion provider like Planned Parenthood and several other abortion providers were able to get taxpayer-funded dollars at a time when those dollars should be going to help provide relief to small businesses, nonprofits, and ultimately the American people suffering from this virus.
The Paycheck Protection Program was created to help businesses with fewer than 500 employees receive forgivable loans up to $10 million to cover approved expenses like payroll, rent, and utilities, so business owners could avoid layoffs during COVID-19 shutdowns. The Treasury Secretary has said loan specifics are private.
As it relates to the names and amounts of specific PPP loans, we believe that that's proprietary information.
But this week, the Small Business Administration released their report detailing money allocated by the program so far, including up to $150 million to Planned Parenthood affiliates operating as part of the nationwide Planned Parenthood Federation of America. The Small Business Administration warned Planned Parenthood of D.C. in May they are, quote, ineligible for a Paycheck Protection Program loan under the applicable affiliation rules and size standards, adding, quote, the loan you've received should be returned.
And we demand that a full investigation be conducted to confirm if Planned Parenthood did in fact fraudulently receive taxpayer money, and that if they did receive that taxpayer money that they were not eligible for, that they will face the consequences associated with those actions.
And that was Eric Rosales reporting for us tonight. He says Senator Marco Rubio and dozens of other senators have asked the Justice Department to investigate the funding. Coming up, how the pandemic is putting a strain on Catholic schools.
I don't want us to look back 10 years from now and say, why didn't we do more to keep those schools open? Why didn't we fight for them?
And slowing the spread. Hear one doctor's advice for all of us. Welcome back to our coronavirus pandemic special. I'm Tracy Sable. Education leaders across the country struggle to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic, but Catholic educators have an extra challenge, trying to prevent a relentless wave of school closings. Correspondent Mark Irons reports.
Financial and enrollment problems compounded by the coronavirus have forced the permanent closure of more than 140 Catholic schools across the country.
I'm starting my 40th year in Catholic education, and I've never seen anything like it.
Kathy Mears is afraid permanent school closures could reach 150 or more. Mears is the interim president of the National Catholic Educational Association, an organization serving nearly 2 million students in Catholic education.
You could argue that Catholic education is one of the best evangelization tools the church has ever had, and we need them. That has not changed. We need people to be formed in the faith.
Schools in the New York City area hit hard, more than 20 Catholic schools shutting doors. And just this month, citing an unsustainable financial situation, the Archdiocese of Newark, New Jersey, closed 8 Catholic schools, announcing funding resources for Catholic schools in the Archdiocese were critically reduced since the outbreak of COVID-19. And paid registrations for the 2020-2021 school year are dramatically reduced. With Catholic education struggling, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has called for emergency assistance in the next COVID-19 aid package.
We have asked for 10% of the federal education money that's going to K-12 schools to be set aside for non-public schools, as we represent 10% of the population. And we would like to see that money being given to families in the form of scholarships.
Kathy Mears argues the values taught in Catholic schools are needed now more than ever as the country suffers through the pandemic.
I don't want us to look back 10 years from now and say, why didn't we do more to keep those schools open? Why didn't we fight for them?
And that was Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. He says that Kathy Mears requests prayers for schools, teachers, and students. And if anyone has the ability to fund a student's Catholic education, now is the time. You can also help reduce the risk of COVID-19. Dr. Thomas McGovern tells me that we need to keep doing our best so that we don't overwhelm hospitals. I interviewed him earlier this month. Dr. Thomas McGovern, co-host of the Dr. podcast and radio show, heard on EWTN Radio, joins me now on Skype. Dr. McGovern, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. As we just heard, presumptive President-elect Joe Biden says that he'll ask Americans to commit 100 days of wearing masks as one of his first acts as president. What's your reaction to that? And also, how helpful do you think that will be in reducing the spread of COVID-19?
Well, masks definitely make a difference. They've been shown in studies to reduce transmission where large groups are wearing them, maybe by 2/3, even the regular surgical mask. I think it's going to be a hard sell. I'm going to be wearing a mask for the next 100+ days, probably in many situations. But when it comes from a national level, we find that people are unlikely to do it unless somebody in their close circle has been or is being affected by it. I think without local control over it, I think it's going to be hard to get people to abide by.
One of the things we're also following, as I know you are as well, is the developments on the vaccine front. What are the guidelines that Catholics should follow about vaccines?
Well, I think there might be a moral duty to receive certain vaccines to help protect other people. But as far as what we need to know about the ethics of how a vaccine was produced, we have vaccines in three categories here. We have those like the Sanofi Pasteur vaccine, which involved no morally illicit methods of production. We have those like the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which are produced in cells derived from an aborted baby. And then we have this new in-between group where some of the early testing to see if this idea of the mRNA vaccine was going to work were done in cells from aborted babies, but the production of the vaccine uses no cells at all. That would be the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, the ones that are closest to coming out. Our bishops have said that those vaccines are moral to receive, while some individual bishops and other groups are saying, hold on, they're not completely morally clean, and we need to, if we receive those, we are allowed to in certain circumstances, we must protest in certain ways that we want them in the future produced completely morally clean.
There's another thing I want to get your input on, and that's the debate that's been going on about whether or not we should open schools up for in-person learning. What do we know about the safety of that? And also, what are the implications of not opening up our schools?
The mental health for students, especially younger students, is dropping when they have to stay home. Anxiety is going through the roof among these groups. I hear it from colleagues of mine around the country. We know that it can be done pretty darn safely with distance and mask wearing. And Benedictine College, great example this week. They completed their first semester. All classes could be done in person, except if there was a professor who was older. And when they were done, there was no contact tracing that revealed classes causing spread. There was no spread in sports events. It was virtually all in living situations. So we know that classes and even sports can be done safely, even in a pandemic.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I really want to get to this last question as it's important to all of us as Catholics. That's being able to attend Mass, especially during this time of year. What are some of the measures that you would recommend to reduce the risk of transmission?
I'm a broken record. Wear your mask, wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart from non-household groups. It works. There's no evidence of things being spread, causing outbreaks when this is done. The outbreaks occur, no masks, close together, singing, not washing.
Up next, fighting for the faithful. How Catholic priests are navigating the coronavirus pandemic. And act of kindness.
I told them not to worry, not to panic.
How a Catholic landlord's gift helped hundreds. Welcome back to our coronavirus pandemic special. I'm Tracy Sable. Catholic priests serve on the front lines during the pandemic. They administer the sacraments, act as hospital chaplains, and provide comfort to the sick and the dying. Correspondent Mark Irons once again.
Many of us have taken measures to avoid coming in contact with the coronavirus. Father Stefan Starzinski has gone right to it.
You gotta get over that initial fear.
As a hospital chaplain in Fairfax County, Virginia, he's ministered to sick and dying patients. Father Starzinski says understanding the importance of his role helps him overcome any fear of getting sick.
I'm realizing that me giving this person last rites, communion, anointing, confession, is more important than bodily health.
Hospitals and nursing homes have limits on family and friends visiting sick loved ones.
They feel afraid. They feel lonely.
In Miami, Florida, Father Parker Ogboy is praying with patients who carry the extra burden of fighting a virus in isolation.
When you visit them, the very first thing is that you notice is that when they open their eyes, you know they are happy that somebody is here.
Hospital chaplain Father Lawrence Ihua in Tampa, Florida, is called to accompany people in their final moments before death.
And I was there with them, to pray with them, and to provide the sacraments of the church to them.
The love of Christ continues to be spread, even as the coronavirus has inflicted suffering.
it's been a very different time, something I've never experienced in my 34 years of being a priest.
Some members of Father Gary Zinder's parish in Bellevue, Washington, have died from COVID-19. Father Zinder has been moved by the experience of praying with parishioners in person or over the phone, and they have been grateful.
There is power in the presence of the Lord, and for many people, the presence of the priest, no matter how he offers that presence, is a powerful one.
In Washington, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
And finally tonight, a landlord in Brooklyn, New York is crediting his Catholic faith on his decision to waive rent earlier this year for his 200 tenants amid the coronavirus outbreak. EWTN Newsroom correspondent Colin Flynn reports.
I told them not to worry, not to panic. We're going through some very tough times with this monster disease. I will waive all the rent for the month of April. I took care of you, young lady. Keep that mask on. Come on, let's go. Paulino.
This is Salerno Auto Body Shop in Brooklyn.
Would you like a donut? I'm good.
And the man in charge is Mario Salerno.
I run a mechanic shop, gas station, and an auto body shop. My dad was here since 1959. This is Williamsburg, where I was born.
Not only does Mario have this garage here in Williamsburg, but he also owns a lot of properties.
I have 80 apartments. I have quite several buildings, close to 200 tenants.
You've built up quite an empire.
Yes, I built these with my own hands, and you know.
And recognizing that so many of his tenants had been hit financially because of the coronavirus, he decided to waive the rent for the month of April. Mario, what made you decide to waive the rent for all your 200 tenants?
Because I had a lot of my tenants losing their jobs. I wanted them to have some peace of mind, not to worry about where their next dollar was. As a human, I felt a lot more comfortable making sure that they had food on their table, which several of them didn't, and I felt very honored to tell them that.
But presumably you're taking a hard hit on this financially. How much are you losing?
We don't want to really bring that issue up. That's irrelevant to the value of a human life, and which I value people's lives. I left a big sign right here on the door. I told, very important, all the tenants, stay safe, help your neighbors, and wash your hands.
Most of his tenants are young, and many have recently lost their jobs.
It was really wonderful, and I really needed it, and it's helping me, and it's going to make it a lot easier and a lot better. I'm a lot less stressed out.
Mario is like one of the genuinely nicest people I've ever met.
Is it a help at a time like this?
For everybody.
For everybody, yeah.
This is the main office. This is where I have my shrine and where I pray. And when I come across tough difficulties, I ask the good Lord.
Mario has a strong faith and says that it helps guide the decisions he makes in life. What is it about you, about your faith, that makes you want to help?
My Catholic faith brought it upon me to make this decision. The value of a life. And I pray every day, and when I have extra time, when I'm in quarantine, I pray and I ask the good Lord to please conquer this vicious virus. I don't really look at it as being a hero. I look at it as being a human. So if I could make it easier on someone's life, just pass it on. Put it back to work for one day. She lives in my other building right there.
Mario's selfless act as a landlord is sure to hit him financially, but he says if it helps his tenants, he really doesn't mind. It's a kind act, and for many, needed now more than ever. In Brooklyn, New York, Colin Flynn for EWTN News Nightly.
Story, and we thank you for watching our special report tonight on the coronavirus pandemic. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.